did this?
It doesn't matter anymore. It matters to me.
Because nobody's hurting you again.
She crossed 1,000 miles to escape the man who nearly destroyed her.
She stepped off the train in the sweltering heat, drowning in a heavy wool dress. When Josiah finally saw the dark, violent bruises hidden beneath her petticoats, his blood ran cold. "Who hurt you?" he whispered. The answer she gave would unravel a deadly secret that followed her all the way west. The Colorado sun beat down on the Oak Haven train depot without mercy, baking the wooden planks of the platform until they smelled of hot pine and creosote. Josiah Montgomery stood in the scant shade of the station master's overhang, his calloused hands turning a battered Stetson over and over. He was a man of 32, built like the unforgiving mountain ranges that bordered his ranch, broad, weathered, and silent. He wasn't looking for romance. He was looking for a partner. Running a 400-acre cattle spread alone was a slow way to die, and the matrimonial advertisements in the Times-Chicago Tribune-Times had seemed like a practical, if unromantic, solution. The whistle of the Denver and Rio Grande echoed down the valley, signaling the arrival of the 3:15. As the massive iron engine groaned to a halt, hissing steam into the dry summer air, Josiah's chest tightened. He had exchanged exactly 3 letters with a woman named Lydia Carmichael. Her handwriting was elegant but hurried, her words practical. She had asked about the harshness of the winters, the distance to the nearest town, and if he was a man prone to drink. He had answered her honestly. The winters were brutal. Town was a 2-hour wagon ride, and he only drank on Christmas and the 4th of July. When the passenger car doors opened, a handful of travelers spilled out into the dust. Among them was a woman who looked entirely out of place. Lydia Carmichael was 24, with hair the color of polished mahogany pulled back into a severe, unyielding bun. But it wasn't her striking, pale features that caught Josiah's attention. It was her attire. In the dead heat of July, where the temperature hovered near 90 degrees, Lydia was clad in a thick, high-collared wool dress, long sleeves buttoned tight at her wrists, and a heavy shawl was draped over her shoulders. She looked as though she was bracing for a blizzard. Josiah stepped forward, his boots heavy on the boards. "Miss Carmichael?" She jumped, her head snapping toward him. Her eyes, a startling shade of hazel, were wide and ringed with exhaustion. Like a spooked doe, she took a half-step back, clutching a worn leather valise to her chest as if it were a shield. "I am Josiah Montgomery," he said, keeping his voice low, recognizing the sheer terror radiating from her. "I reckon you're expected." Lydia swallowed hard, her knuckles turning white around the handle of her bag. "Yes, Mr. Montgomery, it is a pleasure to finally meet you." Her voice trembled slightly, lacking the confident pragmatism of her letters. "You must be boiling in that dress," Josiah noted, gesturing to the heavy wool. "You can leave the shawl in the wagon. The sun is only going to get hotter on the ride out." "No." The word burst from her lips too quickly, too sharply. She immediately lowered her gaze, a flush creeping up her pale neck. "No, thank you. I am quite prone to a chill. The wind, you see." Josiah frowned, looking at the stagnant, windless dust settling around their feet. But he didn't press the issue. "Let's get your trunk loaded then. Judge Harmon is waiting." Their wedding was a sterile, 15-minute affair in the dusty back office of the local magistrate. The judge mumbled through the vows while a fly buzzed against the window pane. When it came time to place the simple gold band on her finger, Josiah noticed how violently Lydia's hand shook. Her skin was ice cold despite the suffocating heat of the room. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Josiah didn't kiss her. He simply nodded, tipped his hat to the magistrate, and led his new bride to the wagon. The ride to the Montgomery Ranch was suffocatingly quiet. The vast, sweeping plains of the Colorado Territory stretched out before them, a sea of sagebrush and golden grass rolling toward the jagged, snow-capped peaks of the Rockies. Josiah stole glances at her. She sat rigidly upright on the wooden bench, her eyes constantly darting to the horizon, to the shadows of the boulders, to the dust kicked up behind them. She wasn't just nervous about a new life. She was actively watching for something, or someone. "It's peaceful out here," Josiah finally said, attempting to break the heavy silence. "Nearest neighbor is 5 miles out. Nobody comes up this road unless they're invited." He meant it to be comforting, a testament to the quiet life he offered. Instead, Lydia's breathing hitched. She pulled the heavy shawl tighter around her neck, her eyes fixed on her lap. "Isolation," she whispered, almost to herself. Isolation can be a blessing. When they finally arrived at the homestead, a sturdy two-story log cabin with a wide wraparound porch, flanked by a massive barn and a corral, Josiah helped her down. As his large hands grasped her waist to steady her descent, he felt her entire body flinch. It wasn't a modest recoil. It was a visceral, panicked jerk. She practically stumbled into the dirt to escape his grip. Josiah froze, his hands still suspended in the air. He looked at her, his jaw tightening. He was a gentleman, respected in Oakhaven for his fair temper and steady hand. To have a woman recoil from him as if he were a coiled rattlesnake stung his pride. But more than that, it ignited a quiet alarm in his gut. "I apologize," Lydia stammered, backing up a step. "I am just clumsy from the journey." "Mrs. Pruitt will show you to your room," Josiah said gruffly, turning his attention to the horses to hide his unease. "Dinner is at 6. You don't have to work today. Just rest." As Lydia hurried toward the cabin, dragging her heavy skirts through the dust, Josiah watched her. The contract was signed, the vows were spoken, but the woman who had just walked into his home was carrying a burden far heavier than her leather trunk. For the first week, life on the Montgomery ranch fell into a strange, uneasy rhythm. Josiah kept his distance, burying himself in the grueling labor of repairing fences and tending to a herd of stubborn shorthorn cattle. He slept in the small bunk room off the kitchen, leaving the spacious master bedroom upstairs entirely to Lydia. Henrietta Pruitt, an older, stout widow who came by 3 days a week to help with the heavy domestic chores, was equally perplexed by the new Mrs. Montgomery. "She works like a mule, I'll give her that," Mrs. Pruitt muttered to Josiah one afternoon as she kneaded bread dough on the kitchen island. "But she's strange, Josiah. She won't let me help her with the wash, won't let me step foot in her room. And in this godforsaken heat, she still wears those heavy winter dresses. I offered her one of my old cotton day dresses, and she looked at me like I was handing her a lit stick of dynamite." Josiah poured himself a cup of black coffee, his brow furrowed. He had noticed it too. Lydia was a phenomenal cook and kept the homestead immaculate, but she moved with a stiff, guarded caution. When she reached for the top shelves in the pantry, she would often stifle a sharp gasp, her face paling. When she dropped a tin plate on the floor, the loud clatter made her drop to her knees and cover her head, shaking for a full 5 minutes before she realized she was safe. He knew she was running from something. He just didn't know what the monsters looked like. The breaking point arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The sky had turned a bruised, violent purple, signaling one of the sudden, torrential summer thunderstorms typical of the high country. The wind was whipping fiercely, kicking up blinding clouds of dust. Josiah was in the barn securing the horses when he heard a sharp, agonizing scream cut through the howling wind. Dropping the pitchfork, he sprinted toward the house. The scream had come from the side yard where the heavy wooden wash tubs were set up. As he rounded the corner, he saw Lydia on the ground. She had been frantically trying to pull the wet laundry from the line before the storm hit. In her rush, she had slipped on a patch of soapy mud left over from the wash water, falling hard against the unforgiving iron rim of the wash basin before collapsing into the dirt. "Lydia!" Josiah roared over the thunder, closing the distance in seconds. She was gasping for air, clutching her side, her face contorted in agony. The fall had been brutal. As she writhed in the mud, her heavy wool skirt and petticoats were caught on the jagged iron foot of the wash tub, tearing a massive rip in the thick fabric and pulling the garments high up her thighs. Josiah dropped to his knees in the mud beside her. "Don't move. Let me see what's broken." He reached out to untangle her skirt from the iron leg, and the world stopped. The breath was knocked out of Josiah's lungs, not from the wind, but from the sight before him. As the heavy wool fell away, the pale skin of Lydia's legs and side was exposed. But it wasn't pale. It was a horrifying canvas of violence. Deep, mottled bruises of angry purple, sickly yellow, and fading black marred her flesh. They weren't from the fall today. These were old wounds, overlapping new ones. There were distinct, dark, finger-shaped bruises, gripping her calves. Higher up, where the dress had torn at her waist, he could see the angry red welts of what looked unmistakably like lash marks wrapping around her ribs. For a terrifying second, Josiah couldn't hear the thunder. He could only hear the roaring in his own ears. He had seen injuries like this on abused horses, on men who had been jumped in saloon brawls. But to see them carved into the skin of his wife sent a wave of cold, murderous rage through his veins. Lydia realized what he was looking at. Panic, pure and unadulterated, seized her. She scrambled backward in the mud, fighting like a trapped animal, desperately trying to pull the torn, muddy wool down to cover herself. "No, no, no, please," she sobbed hysterically, her hands trembling so violently she couldn't grip the fabric. I'm sorry. Please don't hit me. I'll be better, I promise." The words struck Josiah like a physical blow. He froze, instantly raising both hands in the air, showing her his empty palms. He made himself as small as a man of his size could. "Lydia," his voice was a low, steady rumble, contrasting the chaotic storm around them. "Lydia, look at me." She squeezed her eyes shut, crying uncontrollably, curling into a tight, defensive ball. "Lydia, open your eyes." It was a command, but it was laced with a desperate gentleness. Slowly, she opened one terrified eye. "I am not going to touch you," Josiah swore, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't move an inch forward. "I will never lay an angry hand on you. Do you hear me? Never." The first fat drops of rain began to fall, hitting the dust like bullets. Lydia stared at him, her chest heaving, searching his weathered face for the lie. She found none. Only a deep, agonizing sorrow, and behind it, a terrifying, simmering anger that was not directed at her. Josiah swallowed hard, keeping his voice painfully soft. He looked at the horrifying canvas of marks that had forced a woman to wear winter wool in the blistering summer heat. "Who hurt you?" he asked. Lydia let out a broken sob, finally releasing the death grip on her skirt. The rain plastered her hair to her face as the dam broke. "He'll find me," she wept, her voice barely audible over the rain. "He told me, no matter how far I ran, he would find me." Josiah finally closed the distance, shrugging off his heavy canvas coat and draping it gently over her shivering shoulders, careful not to touch her skin. "Who?" Lydia looked up at him, her hazel eyes completely shattered. "Nathaniel Grimes, my brother-in-law." She gasped for air, the pain in her side and the weight of her secret finally too much to bear. "My sister died. She left me the deed to our family store in Chicago. Nathaniel wanted it. When I refused to sign it over, he locked me in the cellar. He said he would beat me until I signed, or until I was dead. Mine, mine, mine. I signed it, and then I ran. I stole the train fare, and I answered your ad because you were 1,000 miles away." She looked at Josiah, expecting him to be furious at the deception, angry that she had brought a dangerous man's wrath to his peaceful homestead. Instead, Josiah stood up, easily lifting her into his arms, coat and all, as if she weighed nothing. His face was a mask of cold, hard stone. "You're in Colorado now, Lydia," Josiah said, carrying her out of the storm and toward the safety of the cabin. "And out here, we don't negotiate with men who put their hands on women. Let Mr. Grimes come. I'll dig the hole myself." For the next 3 weeks, the Montgomery homestead transformed into a sanctuary of quiet healing. Josiah hired Henrietta Pruitt on full time to take over the heavy domestic chores, strictly forbidding Lydia from lifting anything heavier than a tea kettle. He called upon Dr. Harrison Miller, Oak Haven's notoriously discreet physician, to tend to Lydia's cracked ribs and the severe contusions mapping her back. The doctor's grim silence as he wrapped her ribs spoke volumes, but it was Josiah's steady, unwavering presence that truly began to mend her. Josiah never pushed her to speak, never demanded her affection, and always announced his presence before entering a room so as not to startle her. Slowly, the terrified, flinching girl who had stepped off the Denver and Rio Grande began to fade. In her place, a woman with a resilient spirit and a quiet, dry wit began to emerge. Lydia started sitting on the wraparound porch in the evenings, watching Josiah break wild mustangs in the corral, marveling at the gentle, firm way he handled the massive beasts without ever raising a whip. But peace in the untamed West is often just the deep breath before a plunge. The trouble arrived on a sweltering Tuesday in mid-August. Josiah was in town picking up feed when Sheriff Hiram Wallace, a grizzled lawman who had survived the range wars of the 70s, intercepted him outside the Oakhaven General Store. "Josiah," Sheriff Wallace said, his thumbs hooked into his gun belt, "got a stagecoach in from Denver this morning. Brought some bad wind with it. City man. Wears a bowler hat and a silk vest, sweating like a stuck pig in this heat. Brought 2 hired guns with him. Fellas who look like they'd shoot their own mothers for a silver dollar." Josiah's jaw tightened, his hand instinctively resting on the smooth walnut grip of his Colt revolver. "Who is he looking for, Hiram?" "He marched right into my office waving a Chicago arrest warrant," the sheriff replied, his eyes narrowing under his wide-brimmed hat. "Name's Nathaniel Grimes. Says he's looking for a fugitive thief named Lydia Carmichael. Claims she embezzled $5,000 from their family mercantile, assaulted him, and fled the jurisdiction. He's demanding I ride out to your spread and drag her back in irons." A cold, murderous fury bloomed in Josiah's chest. Grimes was not just brutal, he was cunning. He knew that simply tracking down a runaway sister-in-law wouldn't compel the local law to intervene. By framing her for grand larceny and securing a forged warrant from a corrupt Chicago judge, Grimes had legally weaponized the authorities to drag Lydia back to her personal hell. "She's my wife, Hiram. Her name is Lydia Montgomery," Josiah said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, gravelly register. "And that warrant isn't worth the paper it's printed on. The only thing she took from Chicago was the scars he put on her back." Sheriff Wallace spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dust, studying Josiah's face. He knew Montgomery was an honest man, not prone to exaggeration. "I told this Grimes fella that my jurisdiction ends where my common sense begins. I refused to serve the warrant until I wired the Chicago marshals to verify the seal. But I'll tell you this, Josiah, the man didn't look deterred. He looked like a wolf who just smelled blood. He and his gunmen rode out of town 20 minutes ago, headed north, toward your ridge." Josiah didn't waste another second. He vaulted onto his roan gelding, spurred the horse hard, and tore out of Oakhaven in a cloud of blinding dust. The ride back to the ranch usually took 2 hours. Josiah made it in 1, pushing his horse to a frothing gallop. He prayed he wasn't too late. The sun was beginning its fiery descent over the Rockies, casting long, menacing shadows across the ranch, when Josiah crested the final ridge. His heart hammered violently against his ribs. Parked aggressively in his front yard, blocking the porch, were 3 horses. Josiah drew his Colt, kicking his gelding forward. On the porch, the scene was a nightmare made real. Nathaniel Grimes, a tall, impeccably dressed man with cold, dead eyes and a cruel smirk, stood by the front door. Flanking him were 2 massive, heavily armed thugs, Elias Cobb and Jebediah Rust. And there was Lydia. She was backed against the heavy oak railing of the porch, clutching a broom handle like a spear. Her face was chalk white, but she was not cowering. The terrified girl was gone. The woman standing there was fighting for her life. "Look at this rustic squalor," Nathaniel sneered, his polished city boots stepping on Mrs. Pruitt's overturned wash bucket. "You traded a fortune in Chicago for a dirt floor hovel, Lydia. You always were a stupid, ungrateful girl. Now, drop that ridiculous stick and get on the horse. We have a train to catch. If you take one more step, Nathaniel, I swear to God I will drive this through your neck," Lydia hissed, her hands gripping the wood so tightly her knuckles cracked. "Big words for a little thief," Nathaniel mocked, pulling a folded piece of heavy parchment from his vest. "I have a warrant, my dear. The law says you're coming with me. If this pathetic dirt farmer you married tries to stop us, Elias and Jeb will fill him so full of lead, he'll sink into the mud. You better tell your dogs to unholster slow and drop the iron, Grimes." A booming voice echoed across the yard. Nathaniel whipped around. Josiah was sitting atop his lathered horse 30 yards away, his Colt leveled squarely at Nathaniel's chest. The air crackled with lethal tension. Elias Cobb sneered, moving his hand toward his holster. "It's 3 against 1, Cowboy. You ain't that fast." "He doesn't have to be," came another voice from the tree line. Sheriff Hiram Wallace stepped out from the pines, a double-barreled shotgun resting easy against his hip. Behind him, Deputy Virgil Reed had his Winchester rifle sighted right on Jebediah Rust's temple. Turns out, I decided to ride along after all. Drop the guns, boys. Now. The hired guns, calculating the odds of a shotgun blast at close range, slowly raised their hands and let their revolvers fall to the wooden planks. Nathaniel's arrogant smirk faltered, but he quickly recovered, waving the parchment in the air. Sheriff, this is an outrage. I am a respected businessman. I have a lawful warrant for this woman's arrest, for the theft of $5,000 and the deed to the Carmichael mercantile. It's a lie, Lydia cried out, stepping forward from the railing. Her voice rang clear and strong across the yard. The mercantile was left to me by my sister, Sarah. He forged her signature to try and take it, and when I caught him, he beat me. A hysterical lie from a desperate thief, Nathaniel spat, pointing an accusing finger at her. She stole the deed from my safe before she ran. Where is your proof, Lydia? Where is the deed you claim I stole? You have nothing. Lydia didn't flinch. Slowly, she reached down to the heavy, torn wool dress she was wearing, the same suffocating dress she had worn every single day since she arrived. With deliberate, shaking fingers, she gripped the thick, reinforced hem of the skirt and pulled hard at a loose seam she had unstitched earlier that morning. The thick fabric ripped. From deep within the hidden lining of the petticoat, Lydia pulled out a folded, wax-sealed document. It was battered and sweat-stained, but perfectly intact. I have the original deed right here, Lydia said, her voice shaking with adrenaline. She marched down the porch steps and thrust the heavy parchment into Sheriff Wallace's hands. Signed by my sister, witnessed by our family attorney, Elias Thorne, in Chicago. It proves I am the sole owner of the Carmichael estate. Nathaniel Grimes has no legal claim to anything, and his warrant is based on perjury and fraud. Sheriff Wallace unfolded the document, his eyes scanning the official wax seals and the dates. He looked up at Nathaniel Grimes, whose face had drained of all its smug color. Well now, Mr. Grimes, Sheriff Wallace said, cocking the hammers of his shotgun with a menacing, mechanical times. Clack. Forging a warrant, lying to a sworn officer, and attempted kidnapping. Sounds like you'll be enjoying the hospitality of the Colorado Territorial Prison for a long, long time. You can't do this! Nathaniel shrieked, his polished veneer shattering into sheer panic as Deputy Reed slapped heavy iron cuffs onto his wrists. I am a man of means. I'll have your badge, you backward hick. As the deputies dragged a kicking, screaming Grimes and his hired guns toward the town wagons, Josiah dismounted his horse. He walked slowly toward Lydia. The sun was fully setting now, casting a warm, golden glow over the ranch. Lydia stood in the yard, looking down at the heavy wool dress she had used as her armor, her hiding place, and her prison. Without a word, she began to unbutton the thick, suffocating collar. She let the heavy shawl fall into the dirt. Underneath, she wore a simple, light cotton chemise. The evening breeze finally touched her skin, and for the first time in months, she didn't shiver. Josiah reached her, stopping a foot away, respectfully waiting. Lydia looked up into his weathered, gentle face. Tears, this time born of profound relief, spilled over her lashes. I don't have to run anymore, she whispered. Josiah reached out, his calloused thumb gently wiping away a tear from her cheek. No, you don't. You're home, Lydia. She stepped forward, closing the distance, and wrapped her arms tightly around his waist, burying her face in his chest. Josiah held her close, his chin resting softly on the top of her head. The bruises would fade, the scars would remain, but the terror was gone. In the wild, unforgiving expanse of the West, the mail-order bride and the solitary rancher had finally found exactly what they had been searching for. What a breathtaking showdown! Lydia's incredible bravery and Josiah's unwavering protection prove that true love and justice can conquer even the darkest secrets. If this Wild West romance kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. Don't forget to share this story with anyone who loves a thrilling historical drama with an amazing plot twist. Subscribe to our channel right now for more gripping, real-life inspired tales of the frontier.